You're listening to the Let's Go Buffalo podcast, your new favorite podcast for everything Bills and Sabres. Oh, what is going on, everybody? You're listening to the Let's Go Buffalo podcast, your favorite podcast for all things Bills and Sabres, with one singular pal this evening. Episode 56 is coming at you. You know the drill, folks. Quick reminder to follow the social medias. You can find us at the handle Let's Go Buff Pod. That's 2 F's on that. And you know where we are. We're everywhere. Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok. I think that's the big ones. Unfortunately, no fellas to say hello to today. It is just me. Jake is a busy bee, and Tom, to kick off his school year, is sick as a dog. So speedy recovery to Tommy. Folks, this isn't going to be a normal like hour-long podcast. It's just me. So I think my plan for the evening here, we're just going to rip through the initial 53-man roster that the Bills whittled down yesterday on the 27th, and really just kind of talk about the big things with that, the surprises. There were only a couple. There weren't a ton. Some things that could absolutely be debated, no doubt, but nothing absolutely crazy was going on. But there are some things to talk about for sure. So the way I'll do this here is basically just go position by position, read off the guys that made the team. And then if any of those guys got cut, or any of those guys at that position that got cut and potentially made the practice squad, I'll touch on that as well. So yeah, here we go. I'm breaking a beverage rule. I don't have one at all. You guys remember how I said last week that I was off the sauce for a minute? I lied. I was on the sauce very quickly after that. So I promise, next pod, I'm going to have a damn beer. I just keep forgetting. I'm really sorry. Down here, still getting my feet wet in Nash, and beer for the pod just isn't a crazy high priority. I keep forgetting. I'm so sorry, but it's not a lack of love. So with all that being said, let's jump into this 53-man roster reaction. I'm not going to post anything. So if you're an audio person only for the Let's Go Buff Pod, you are in luck because it's just my dumbass, weird, raspy voice that you're stuck with this week. So let's get into it here. We'll start with the offense. Quarterbacks, we kept 2. I'm sure you'll be shocked to find that Josh Allen did make the roster. Backup quarterback on the roster right now is Mitchell Trubisky, but that may change a little bit here. We did sign Mike White to the practice squad today, today being the 28th, so there's a chance he could possibly end up being the backup quarterback. Who knows? We'll all just kind of have to let that shake out a little bit. Or maybe Mitch's injury isn't as bad as we thought, and we'll get him back sooner than we initially thought. But it's tough to say for sure with that whole thing. So one quick thing to keep in mind with this, folks, it's the initial, right? We still have, 2-ish weeks until the Bills actually play a game. So things will change here. It's very unlikely that this is the roster that we will go into week 1 against Arizona with. So be patient. Some of this definitely will change. It's like pretty much a guarantee. So if there's something right now that you're really passionately pissed about, just chill. We'll see what happens here. So that's the quarterbacks. Running backs, we've got 4 making this roster. Reggie Gilliam, who was a guy that I predicted as a possible guy that might not make the team, but shows what I know. He is back in his kind of swing fullback tight end blocking role. And then the 3 guys you would imagine: James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. I think it'll be super interesting to see how those carries get split up this season. Just with Joe Brady being the full-time play caller. And, we talked very briefly last week about some concerns that I have with James Cook and the love that I have for Ray Davis right now. I think he could really push James Cook for the guy as the leading toucher of the football from the running back position. So we'll see what happens there. Wide receiver was an interesting one, just because, a lot of people felt like there was a really good shot this could be the year where we keep 6. And surprise, it wasn't. But I think a lot of people, myself included, were kind of hoping that 5th wide receiver might be a guy like KJ Hamler or Tyrell Shavers, and not MVS, which is not what happened. MVS was that fifth wide receiver. There's a lot of people that are predicting he could be one of those guys that's inactive on game days, which would be interesting because then you're only dressing 4 wide receivers, which seems pretty low. But with the tight end room depth that we have on this team, and we'll get to that next. It kind of makes, at least I feel like it makes that 6th wide receiver tough to roster. The only thing I would have imagined with the 5th wide receiver is that it would have been a guy like Tyrell Shavers, who at the very least offers a ton of special teams ability. MVS is a one-trick pony with no special teams ability. My guess it was just the contract that won him this job, having all that guaranteed money. So kind of a bummer for me personally that MVS made the squad over a guy like Tyrell Shavers. But yeah, it is what it is. Tyrell Shavers is at least back on the practice squad, so we didn't lose him. I did forget some of these as well in terms of positions, we've already went through. So I mentioned that Mike White is on the practice squad. Frank Gore Jr. was released. He is also on the practice squad, so we did get him back. And worth mentioning that Darrington Evans is on IR, but he's designated as a return. So at some point this season, Darrington Evans is going to be on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see what the Bills do with him in that situation. In terms of guys that were released, you had Tyrell Shavers, Justin Shorter, another notable one, since he was a draft pick last year, but he didn't even get brought back on the practice squad. So looks like the Bills were ready to cut ties with Justin Shorter here. Damiere Byrd was cut, Xavier Johnson cut, Andy Isabella was also a cut, and from what I can see, has not been brought back on the practice squad as well. And then Deon Cain, currently a member of the practice squad. So 3 wide receivers on the practice squad. Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler made it as well, and Deon Cain brought back from the practice squad. Offensive line, the Bills decided to keep 9. Those 9 that we kept: Dion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, and Spencer Brown. Those are your presumed starters across the offensive line. And then the guys that we kept, man, really, really good looking crop of young offensive line depth. You've got Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, Tylen Grable, and Cedric Van Pran Granger, So yeah, between those 4 guys, Anderson, Vandermark, Grable, VPG, really solid, young, high upside offensive line depth. So we love to see that. As far as the practice squad goes, guys that were brought back, we had Mike Edwards, Richard Garage, and Will Clapp brought back. Guys that were cut, let's see here. Gunnar Britton, no surprise there. Kelvin Jarvis, no surprise there. Lyle Collins, no surprise. And Keaton Bills, no surprise. Travis Clayton was placed on injured reserve, and Tommy Doyle is on the PUP at this time. So yeah, no surprises there with the offensive line. I think, those rookies that made the team, they absolutely earned it. So really, really, really great for those guys there. Your first guys off the bench, I would have to imagine, or your first tackle off the bench is probably Ryan Vandermark. And then your first inside offensive lineman, probably Alec Anderson, I would guess. And that's it for our offense there. So pretty solid 53 starting there. I'll be honest with y'all. I've got some concerns about the wide receiver depth. I think I echo a lot of people's sentiment for that. Like, one of those guys goes down. Like MVS and Curtis Samuel just got back to practice today. I think they were full participants, so maybe their injury concern going into week 1 is little. But I don't know, man. Having those guys just being back at practice today and MVS being an injury-prone wide receiver pretty much his entire career, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have concerns about the wide receiver depth. But, you have to imagine that Bean has that in his back pocket as a concern. And there are some decent players on the practice squad that we can call up. So that's what you're looking at for the offensive line. Let's see. If we were a podcast that had ads, here's where we would put an ad. So if you want to support us here with what you're doing and you come across this, definitely get in touch, and we'd put your ad right here in this episode. Let's get to the defense here. Defensive ends. So we kept 6, which is a little bit higher than normal. The 6 guys that we kept: Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Von Miller, Dwan Smoot, Javon Solomon, and here was the big surprise: Casey Toohill, who we saw little to none from in training camp. That was one that was a major surprise. I'm not positive as to the reasoning, and at this point, I'm not sure anybody is except for Brandon Beane. If I was to make an educated guess here, my educated guess on why he made the team, it's probably special teams. At the very, very least, Casey Toohill has insane athletic profile. His RAS score is well over a 9. So there's some athleticism to be desired there. He's got good size as well. So that has to be. I would be, if I'm a betting man, that's my guess. I don't have another good reasoning aside from that. Going into this, my guess, if I had known we were going to keep 6 defensive ends, my thought would have been Kingsley Jonathan. I thought he had a great camp, had a couple really great moments in preseason games, but he doesn't have the size or the athleticism of a Casey Toohill. So that is my best guess, but that is definitely a head scratcher. The rest of them, not a surprise. Defensive tackles, we kept 4. Those 4 are Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, no surprise there, Dwayne Carter, and Austin Johnson. So probably the top 4 you would have assumed if you had been told that they were going to keep 4. As far as practice squad positions go, we did manage to get Ilianku is back, Kingsley Jonathan from the defensive end group, and Cameron Klein from the defensive end group, both brought back on the practice squad. And then as far as defensive tackles go, like I mentioned, Ilianku and Branson Dean. So yeah, no crazy surprises there. Guys that were cut: Gable Stevenson and Deshaun Williams. So Deshaun Williams. So no major surprises there. Pretty cut and dry. Don't have to think about it too much. Linebackers, we kept 6. Here's where we have our really, really fun feel-good story. Joe Andreessen did make the team, which is just awesome, man. It's really great to see a Lancaster native and then a UB product make the team. So shout out Buffalo Joe. We're stoked for you, man. It's just one of those feel-good things, right? A lot of shitty things in the world, and cool to see a local kid be playing for his favorite childhood team. And a guy that it's not like, like he made it and I think will make impacts, particularly on special teams with his athleticism. So congrats to Buffalo Joe. The other 5 that were kept, your 2 presumed starters, Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams. And then in addition, we have Balen Spector, Edifwan Ulofoshio, and Nicholas Moreau. So some good veteran depth there with Nicholas Moreau and Balen Spector, who's been in the system for a little bit, and some really athletic rookies making the team with some pretty legit upside. Shane Simon and Deion Jones were your players that were cut. You might be wondering where Matt Milano's name is at this point. He's on IR, also designated to return. So he does not count against the 53 to start. So don't worry. He's not anywhere that we need to worry about. Just on IR. So he doesn't count against the initial 53. As far as the practice squad goes, let's see here. Actually, from what I can tell, we currently don't have a linebacker on the practice squad from what I can see based on the list. So maybe I'm seeing something that's a little bit outdated. And if so, shame on me. I do see we have one more projected practice squad spot here because, fun fact, if I can back up a little bit, Kingsley Jonathan does not count towards the 16 because he is a part of the International Players Association because he's from Nigeria, which is pretty sick. So at this time, we do have 16 players, but Kingsley Jonathan does not count. So we have an open spot right now. We do imagine, though, or at least I imagine, that spot is actually going to go to another wide receiver. There's a lot of rumblings that Jalen Virgil from Denver is in talks with Bean about possibly being brought back on the practice squad. So at this point, that's what I think that last spot is for. But we'll see. Things can change very quickly in this business, as we all know. So that's it for our linebackers. Our cornerbacks. This was another surprise here. So we kept 6 CBs. The guys that made the team are Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, Taron Johnson, Kai Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, and Brandon Codrington. So that's probably a name that you don't know super well, and that's totally fine because he was signed to the team yesterday through a trade. We actually traded late round picks with the New York Jets to bring in Brandon Codrington. He's going to be our return guy. He had some pretty legit return stats this season. I think it was something crazy in not very many returns this preseason. He was able to force 17 tackles. It was like in the course of like 8 punt returns or 6 punt returns or something like that. So a pretty shifty guy that looks like he should serve the role well. With that came the cutting of Daquan Hardy, which was a huge surprise for those of us that have been following the preseason pretty closely. Daquan Hardy showed quality coverage skills in preseason, but Brandon Beane has already had a press conference today, and he did indicate the fact that, or the reason he wasn't brought back was because on those punt returns, on many of them, Daquan Hardy did show some questionable and, dare I say, reckless ideas with the ball. So I think they're just looking for his decision making to mature a little bit. He is back on the practice squad, so he's with the organization. He's not long gone. But I think that's the reason this happened was somebody, whether it be McDermott or Matthew Smiley or Brandon Beane, did not like the decision making and frankly was not comfortable giving this guy the keys to the car yet. So, hopefully that'll just be a 1-year thing, and we'll see pretty soon what goes on with the return stuff. But yeah, it's going to be a guy that we haven't seen yet in a Bills uniform. In addition to Daquan Hardy being cut, we also saw Kyron Brown, Kenai Lovely, and Takori Couch be cut as well. Takori Couch, along with Daquan Hardy, though, was brought back to the practice squad. So your CBs on the practice squad, Takori Couch and Daquan Hardy, 2 quality guys there. I like that depth a lot as far as practice squad depth goes. And then your safeties. We kept 5 safeties. Rookie Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, Mike Edwards, and DeMar Hamlin. Maybe a little bit surprising that Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop were kept. Cole Bishop, not so much because he was a 2nd-round pick, but Mike Edwards, maybe that's a little surprising considering he's been injured the entire preseason. But like I've said on this pod before, I don't think you can be upset about the film, especially this Kansas City film. I think he's a quality safety. So we'll see what the safety room looks like week 1. At this point, it looks like it's possible that maybe Mike Edwards or Cole Bishop have a shot to come back, but tough to say for sure. They're not on IR or anything like that, or PUP from what I can see. So those guys are making the roster, and I doubt will be game day inactives, or maybe it's possible to start. Who knows? But yeah, those are your 5 safeties. Again, just quality depth there. Your guys that were cut, Terrell Burgess and D. Delaney, those guys are both on IR. Kareem Jackson and Kendall Williamson also were cut. Kareem Jackson, though, brought back to the practice squad. So as far as guys that were outright cut, Kendall Williamson, the only guy that is just gone. And then your specialists, no surprises. The only guys that were really there, Reed Ferguson, your long snapper, Tyler Bass, your kicker, Sam Martin, your punter. There was never really much of a doubt there about who those were going to be. There was really no competition. Little bit for the punting job, but that other guy was cut pretty soon. So there you have it, folks. I'm just going to go through one more time and read through the guys that made the team, and then I'll read off the practice squad one more time. So guys making the initial 53-man roster. Quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Mitchell Trubisky. That'll probably be up in the air a little bit more, though, with Mr. as far as Mitch goes. Running backs, 4 of them. Reggie Gilliam, James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson. Wide receivers, 5. Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Marquez Valdez Scantling. 3 tight ends, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Quentin Morris. And your guys that were cut there were Zach Davidson, Trey McKitty. I don't think I talked about that. I think I went right from wide receiver to offensive line. I apologize. And as far as your tight ends that came back onto the practice squad, Zach Davidson is back. So we have a nice athletic tight end waiting in the wings for us. Sorry about that, folks. My bad. Offensive line being capped on the 53. Deion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, and Spencer Brown. Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, Tylen Grable, SVP are your backups there. Defensive end, guys making the initial 53. Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Von Miller, DeJuan Smoot, Javon Solomon, and Casey Toohill. Defensive tackles, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter, Austin Johnson. Linebackers, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Edifwan Ulofoshio, Nicholas Moreau, and Joe Andreessen. Cornerbacks, Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, Darren Johnson, Kyer Elam, Jamarcus Ingram, Brandon Codrington, the little surprise there. Safeties, Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, Mike Edwards, Damar Hamlin. And once more, your specialists, Reed Ferguson, Tyler Bass, Sam Martin. Your practice squad players, CBs, or your cornerbacks, Daquan Hardy to Corey Couch. Defensive ends, Cameron Klein, Kingsley Jonathan. Defensive tackles, Branson Dean, Eli Anku. Offensive linemen, Mike Edwards, Richard Garage, Will Clapp. Quarterback, Mike White. Running back, Frank Gore Jr. Safety, Kareem Jackson. Tight end, Zach Davidson. And then 3 wide receivers, Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler, and Dion Kane. Don't forget, currently, we have a 17th practice spot that is available, but it is a decent guess that at this point that will go to Jalen Virgil, the wide receiver from Denver. But who knows? That could obviously change as well. So there you have it, folks. The Bills' initial 53-man roster. It's going to be in flux, folks. Don't forget, this is probably going to change a little bit more. Although day one here, there were really no changes from the initial 53. So there's also a chance that it might not change, but there's reasonable expectation to think that it will. Like I said, we still got right around 2 weeks a little over 2 weeks until our first game. So we'll see what happens here. But hey, we always got your back here. You can always catch us for the latest on the Bills and Sabres news here. Don't forget to follow the social medias. That's again the handle at Let's Go Buff Pod. And folks, we will catch you on the flip side.
Thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for spending some time with us. Please give us a like and a follow on Instagram, X, TikTok, and our YouTube channel at Let's Go Buff Pod. These are my pals, Jake and Nigel. My name is Tom, and you're listening to the Let's Go Buffalo podcast. We're sending you love wherever you are. Go Bills, go Sabres, let's go Buffalo.